Hello there, and welcome to the RetroSaber podcast, where we always take the high ground, and it is episode 10 of the RetroSaber podcast. Now, normally I would do something specifically focused on the channel, or the number 10 for such an anniversary, but we are just a matter of weeks away from WrestleMania, and more importantly, we are about, well, I'm going to guess because I haven't got an announced date at the time of recording, but we are a few days away from the release of WWE 2K24, and the theme for the game this year is WrestleMania 40. So they're doing a 40 years of WrestleMania mode where you play through iconic matches from each of those events. Now, I don't know yet whether they're going to do one from every show, whether it's just going to be key matches, what it might be. So I decided to do this in advance. Now, by the time you listen to this, we might already know, but I've decided to do this in advance, talking through what I would pick from each WrestleMania. So I am going to pick 40 matches. Now, obviously, I have to do a little bit of realism in this. So I'm not going to allow myself to pick anybody who currently wrestles at AEW. If a wrestler isn't necessarily under contract with WWE, I'll still pick them because they can still sign legend contracts, and that's still a possibility. But if they're in AEW or another company like TNA, then I won't. So that's my one rule. One match from each pay-per-view, and they can't be in one of the other major wrestling companies. Some of these I might talk about in a little bit of detail, others I might just very quickly skim over, because otherwise this will be the longest podcast ever. So we are going to get started with WrestleMania 1. And this might be one of the hardest ones ever, because most of these wrestlers don't have any link to WWE anymore, or at least most matches don't. However, I am going to go with the main event, which was a tag team match between Hulk Hogan and Mr. T versus Paul Orndorff and Roddy Piper. Roddy Piper and Hulk Hogan have both been featured in the majority of the wrestling games recently. I'm sure they could get Paul Orndorff to agree, and they have had Mr. T, not in 2K23, but he was in 2K22, so we're going to consider that the first match on the game. WrestleMania 2 has a couple of options. You've got Hulk Hogan versus King Kong Bundy, would be a reasonable one, but I'm going to go for Randy Savage versus George the Animal Steele. I think that's got a bit more of a story to it, and I think it'd be a little bit more interesting, given that it helps set up what we might pick for the next one. Oh, what was I thinking? Yeah, see, in my head I was thinking we could go the route of Macho Man Randy Savage versus Ricky Steamboat, because George the Animal Steele was in Ricky Steamboat's corner, and that was just one of the best wrestling matches ever. However, we've got Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant as the main event, and that's got that biggest WrestleMania moment of all time with the slam in there. So, I don't know, maybe Randy Savage versus Ricky Steamboat can be a bonus match you unlock or something, because Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant has to be WrestleMania 3's match on the game. WrestleMania 4 is that famous one where it massively focuses on a tournament. You do have Hogan versus Andre again this time round, but it's ends in a disqualification or a count-out or something. It wouldn't be particularly exciting. So I'm going to go with the main event, which was the end of the tournament, Randy Savage versus Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man. I think that would be something a bit different. It's probably the only time Randy Savage is going to get to really steal that main event slot over Hogan during the early 80s, and $1 Million Man wouldn't really get any other main events at WrestleMania, so yeah, we'll give them both this one. WrestleMania 5 is starting to actually show a fair few fighters that do actually make it into the 2K games, but I think for this one, as obvious as it is, I think we have to go for the main event again. Hulk Hogan versus Randy Savage. You've got the option to unlock some new costumes, because, you know, you can do that as you work through the game, maybe. That one would just be a fantastic one to do. It was a great match as well. And WrestleMania 6, we got to go again with the main event. There just wasn't really that many other truly big matches on the card, but the main event was immense. Ultimate Warrior versus Hulk Hogan, Intercontinental Champion versus WWF Champion. It's automatically got to be that one. It was a massive WrestleMania moment as well, seeing the Ultimate Warrior finally dethrone Hogan. Not that that would last very long, but still, that one's got to make the game. And at WrestleMania 7, we finally step away from the main event, or at least the match that is put in the position of main event, because I really feel like this one is definitely the real main event of this card. The Ultimate Warrior versus Macho King Randy Savage in a retirement match. Not only was this in many ways one of the best matches that either of these wrestlers ever had, it was also such a great story. Savage was the bad guy. He was finally vanquished after a really, really strong showing, and he then suddenly sees the light. He's attacked by his manager, only to be rescued by the woman who would become his wife in storyline. They were already really married. It gives you that beautiful WrestleMania moment. He loses the match, but he's still happy at the end because he's reunited with Elizabeth. Oh, it's beautiful. So that one definitely needs to make the cut. For WrestleMania 8, I was initially and literally recorded myself saying that we would go for Randy Savage versus Ric Flair. But mind blown, I've just remembered Ric Flair actually is with AEW now, so we can't go for that. So the match on this card that I think would get the throw onto the game would be Bret the Hitman Hart versus Roddy Piper for the Intercontinental title. It's maybe the best match on the card anyway, so that's the one I think we're going to go for WrestleMania 8. WrestleMania 9 is a tricky one because you've got some absolute stinkers, to be honest. Even the matches that are half decent end in a bit of a crappy way. So for this one, I'm going to say Money Incorporated, which is Ted DiBiase and Erwin R. Shyster, versus the Mega Maniacs Hulk Hogan and Brutus the Barber Beefcake. It still doesn't end in a particularly good way, but the fact that we'll get to throw in IRS on there, who's the father of both Bray Wyatt and his brother, Bo Dallas, I think that would be a nice little thing to do to get him in the game as well. And it was certainly one of the biggest sells of the card, even if it ended up falling flat. Finally, we hit the 1/4 point as we hit WrestleMania 10. Now, undoubtedly the best match on this card is Owen Hart versus Bret the Hitman Hart. However, the WWF games do not have access to Owen Hart. In fact, I think he actually is in the AEW game. So while he isn't signed with AEW, his likeness is contracted to them. So instead, I'm going to go for the ladder match because WrestleMania moment right there. Shawn Michaels, Razor Ramon, Intercontinental Championship, ladder match, thing of beauty, get it in the game. WrestleMania 11 kind of sucked ass. The main event had Lawrence Taylor, who's a footballer, in there, and there really wasn't a good match on the card for me. Bret Hart versus Bob Backlund was maybe one of the better matches, but I just don't know that feels like that big Mania type match. So instead, I'm going to say Diesel versus Shawn Michaels. It was for the WWF title, so we'll put that on there, but don't expect anything special. WrestleMania 12 may be the easiest pick of the lot. Shawn Michaels versus Bret the Hitman Hart, Iron Man match, WWF title, considered by many to be one of the best matches in WrestleMania history. Slightly overcooked in my opinion. I don't think it's quite as good as all that, but it is still a very good match. It goes in the game, maybe the only Iron Man match in the game in my opinion. Get it in. And WrestleMania 13 is probably just as easy. Bret the Hitman Hart, again, this time versus Stone Cold Steve Austin in an I Quit match. This is absolutely iconic for the development of Stone Cold Steve Austin. He loses the match and it makes his character. Plus, you get Ken Shamrock in there as the guest referee, guest enforcer. So, given that this game does actually include guest referee matches, boom, it fits. And you get to have Ken Shamrock as an unlockable within the game. WrestleMania 14 is probably a little bit of a tougher one for me because you've got The Undertaker versus Kane for that first time ever, or Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Shawn Michaels with Mike Tyson in there for the WWF title. I'm going to go for The Undertaker versus Kane simply because Mike Tyson being in there, I don't know that they'll get the license for him. In fact, when they did this for the showcase mode, I think it was 2K16 with Stone Cold Steve Austin, they just had this generic The Enforcer person involved in the match, which just looked lame and awful. So for that reason alone, I'm going to say Undertaker versus Kane, and that's how you can unlock the classic look for Kane. I am going to try and throw in there a little bit things you can unlock. It only just occurred to me now, so I'm going to do that as I go along. For WrestleMania 15, Stone Cold Steve Austin versus The Rock. It's the first of what I believe would be a trilogy of matches between the two of them at WrestleMania. And whilst it's not necessarily the best one they would have, it's where it all starts. Get that in there. You can unlock the classic look for The Rock with this. Brilliant match. Go for it. WrestleMania 16, or WrestleMania 2000 as it was called. Oh my god, this one is so difficult, but not for the right reasons. The main event is a fatal four-way: Triple H, The Rock, Mick Foley, and Big Show. You could throw that in, though it wasn't particularly inspired. However, the whole selling point was that there was a McMahon in every corner. We don't have the McMahons in the game anymore, and for many reasons, I am glad about that. I'm not going to get into that in my podcast, but if you know, you know, we wouldn't really want to see them in the game. The main match that everyone loved in this was the Triangle Ladder match, but Edge and Christian and the Hardy Boys are both in AEW now, so we can't have that. And then you had the Triple Threat match, which was Chris Jericho versus Benoit versus Kurt Angle. Well, Chris Jericho is in AEW, and I don't really want Benoit matches in it. Again, if you know, you know. So I'm having to pick a really random and bang average match for this. And I'm going to say Kane and Rikishi versus X-Pac and Road Dogg. There you go. And it's cool to have DX in there. That's awesome, so we'll get them in. Rikishi is part of the Bloodline family, so you can tie it into that, I suppose. But that one was not easy. WrestleMania X7. Oh my god, this one is a nightmare. First of all, the standout matches would either be the Triple Threat TLC match with the Hardys, Dudleys, Edge and Christian, but 4 of those are in AEW. Part of me would want that Triple Threat Hardcore title match because it was hilarious with Kane and Raven, who they could sign. There's no reason they couldn't sign him to the game. But Big Show is in there, and Big Show is in AEW, so they can't use that. I don't want to use the main event, because as much as Austin versus The Rock is a huge match and a fantastic moment, Vince McMahon is heavily integrated into how that match goes, critical to how that match goes, and for very obvious reasons, we are absolutely not picking anything with Vince McMahon, and he is certainly not going to make it into the game. So instead, I'm sort of forced to pick the match between Undertaker and Triple H. Still a good match, highly featured, bit it in the game. WrestleMania 18, I didn't even need to look at the matches on the card. Right away, The Rock versus NWO Hulk Hogan. Hollywood Hulk Hogan. One of the biggest Mania matches and moments of all time. A really good match, and you can use it to unlock the entire NWO. Right there. Boom. Brilliant. WrestleMania 19 was a fantastic card. One of the best matches on it is Shawn Michaels versus Jericho. But again, Jericho's in AEW, so we couldn't get him in the game. So instead, I'm going to say The Rock versus Stone Cold. Granted, we couldn't have that full trilogy, but you can show clips of it, insinuate it in the sort of promo video. But this time around, they definitely deserve it. Plus, then you've got a Rock beats Austin and an Austin beats Rock, both on the game. WrestleMania 20 had some really good matches on there as well, but again, for lots of different reasons, there's key ones that can't make it into the game. For me, the one that really should take it and deserves it is Kurt Angle versus Eddie Guerrero. Eddie Guerrero deserves to be in this WrestleMania series because he had some good matches at Mania, but that one against Kurt Angle for the WWE Championship, that's the one. That's the one that should make it onto the game. And we're at the halfway point, so thank God. WrestleMania 21 is an absolute killer. Oh my god, the fact that the 2 title matches, John Cena versus Bradshaw, Batista versus Triple H, either one of those could be on it, but I'm not even considering them. It's going to come down to between The Undertaker versus Randy Orton, the Legendary Streak versus the Legend Killer, or Kurt Angle versus Shawn Michaels. I'm going to go with Angle versus Michaels, though, because we've seen so many of the Undertaker matches in previous games. I'm sure there was one where it was literally all about the Undertaker streak. Whereas Kurt Angle versus Shawn Michaels, it's an amazing match. You can use it to unlock that version of Michaels, whatever. So good. Again, we are on a good streak of WrestleManias now. WrestleMania 22 had some really good matches in there. Again, Edge versus Mick Foley, hardcore match, would have been amazing. Edge is in AEW, we can't use that. The match between Shawn Michaels and Vince McMahon was a fantastic match, but we are not touching anything to do with Vince McMahon. So that kind of leaves me with Rey Mysterio versus Kurt Angle versus Randy Orton, or John Cena versus Triple H. I don't know, for me personally, I think that the John Cena versus Triple H was the better match overall, or the bigger match. I kind of love Rey Mysterio versus Angle versus Orton, but I think John Cena deserves it. He deserves that thing, so we'll get John Cena in there and give him that match. Angle's already had a couple at least. WrestleMania 23 again has some really good matches. There's some potential picks in there, but for me, I think the one we have to go with is the match between Shawn Michaels and John Cena, the main event. Shawn Michaels is the showstopper. John Cena at this point was really getting to his best, so that's the one that deserves it. WrestleMania 24 is absolutely going to blow my mind and break my heart, because the matches that absolutely should be on here, The Undertaker versus Edge. Edge is in AEW. Shawn Michaels versus Ric Flair in a career-threatening match. One of the most beautiful and heartbreaking moments in wrestling history. Ric Flair is in AEW, so we can't use him. So for me, we're going to end up going for the triple threat match between Randy Orton, Triple H, and John Cena. It just doesn't really feel that big, but it's the only one I really feel we can go for. And Randy Orton probably deserves to make it into this game somewhere along the line. I think at that point as well, Triple H was sort of still in his DX phase. If I remember right, you can unlock that. If I don't, you can't. WrestleMania 25, it's only going to be one thing. Undertaker, Shawn Michaels. They had two of the best wrestling matches of all time. And I don't just mean WrestleMania, I mean of all time. Back to back. And that one absolutely has to make this game. You can use it to unlock the different looks, whatever you want, but get it in there. And guess what? WrestleMania 26 is going to be no different. We are going to have Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels again, no disqualification, streak versus career, main event. It's when Shawn Michaels should have retired. Unfortunately, he did come back, but it was that brilliant moment, WrestleMania moment, and I don't think anyone's going to complain about having those two matches back to back, because they were both classics. WrestleMania 27, a little bit trickier. Quite frankly, The Miz versus John Cena as the main event doesn't really cut it. And The Undertaker versus Triple H was a good match, but it wasn't their best one. I think because we've already had Undertaker versus Triple H on this, and we may well have it again, I'm instead going to go for Randy Orton versus CM Punk. This wasn't anything too exceptional, but it gets CM Punk in the game. You get that unlock, and yeah, it's something different. WrestleMania 28 may be trying to blow my mind. Oh my god, first of all, you've got CM Punk versus Jericho in a really good match. You've got The Rock versus John Cena, and you've also got the Hell in a Cell match between Shawn Michaels and Triple H, which was just a fantastic match. For me, it has to come down to either the Hell in a Cell or The Rock versus Cena. I'm going to pick the Hell in a Cell, because I'm pretty sure that once-in-a-lifetime match between The Rock and John Cena happens again the next year. Well, what do you know? I was right. John Cena versus The Rock for the WWE Championship in the main event. We have got The Undertaker versus CM Punk, which, damn, that's a good match. But I'm going to go with the Cena Rock match. Come on, it really is an iconic WrestleMania type moment. And this isn't necessarily to be a list of the best matches. These are WrestleMania moment type matches. And John Cena versus The Rock, that's one. WrestleMania 30. Oh, this is going to be a tricky one. Look, undeniably, the biggest moment on that night was Brock Lesnar beating The Undertaker to end the streak. That's one of the biggest moments, that was the biggest moment of the year. Maybe in wrestling of the decade. However, there's a lot of stuff going on that is keeping Brock away from WWE at the moment, and there's a very good chance we're not going to see Brock in any WWE content for a while. Separate to that, two of the matches featured Daniel Bryan, who's in AEW, so again we can't use. So I'm going to have to go with John Cena beating Bray Wyatt. It's the only other real option on the card. Oh, they're not making this easy, are they? Looking at WrestleMania 31, I'm just trying to dodge AEW wrestlers that have gone away to other companies is hard enough. Trying to avoid wrestlers that are implicated in goddamn scandals, that's making this a nightmare. So we can't have Triple H versus Sting, despite it being a brilliant way to unlock versions of DX or NWO, because Sting's in AEW. The main event, which was a massively iconic match and moment, has Brock Lesnar in there, and we're not going to touch that. So for me, we're going to go for The Undertaker versus Bray Wyatt. Agreed that Bray Wyatt losing that match was kind of a stinker, but I think if we can get Bray Wyatt in this game as much as possible, it's deserved. For WrestleMania 32, the main event is Roman Reigns versus Triple H for the title, but it doesn't really feel that spectacular. I kind of would have liked to go for the women's triple threat match, but Sasha Banks, she's on the verge of signing for AEW. She definitely isn't with WWE, so that would technically, although it would be within the rules, it would definitely feel like cheating. So instead, again, I'm going to go for something a little bit outside the box. I'm going to go for the Dudley Boys, because it is even rumoured they're going to be in this game anyway, versus the Usos. Why not get a little bit of early bloodline love in there? The Usos versus the Dudley Boys for the tag teams. Is it the tag team? It's not even for the tag team titles, it's just a match. But it would be a cool way to unlock the Dudleys and unlock that retro version of the Usos. So what the hell, we're going to go with that. For WrestleMania 33, I kind of feel like we have to go for the match between Seth versus Triple H or the match between The Undertaker and Roman Reigns. But that match was kind of a dud, as much as it was the main event and feels big. So I'm going to go with Seth versus Triple H. Unsanctioned match. We can have an unlockable of Seth's really cool attire. In fact, I think in this one was where he did his sort of White Walker look. That would be a cool one. So let's go with that one. For WrestleMania 34, I think we're finally at a point where we have to start putting some respect on the women's matches by this point. I'd really like to have Kurt Angle and Ronda Rousey versus Triple H and Stephanie McMahon, but Stephanie McMahon doesn't really have any ties to the company anymore, and that's one name I don't think they'd be able to bring back in. As much as she's one of the few McMahons who it seems isn't connected with any kind of scandal, I just don't want to go with that one for those reasons. So instead, I'm going to say Charlotte Flair versus Asuka for the SmackDown Women's Championship. These two are genuine bona fide main eventers in their own right, and that was a damn good match, so I'm going to throw that one into the game. WrestleMania 35, I think, is quite an easy one. The main event, Becky Lynch versus Ronda Rousey versus Charlotte Flair. I know that Ronda Rousey did have that brief little matchup in Ring of Honor, which is connected to AEW, but she didn't sign for them. She has not signed for AEW. So as far as I am concerned, she is still a free agent. And if WWE want to put Ronda Rousey in the game, I'm sure there's a certain amount of money that she would allow that to happen. So I'm going to go with that. The women deserve that big main event spotlight as well. And it was a decent match. So, yeah. Okay, WrestleMania 36, and here's where things get interesting, because this is where the WrestleMania starts to split across night 1 and night 2. So here's what I'm going to do. I am actually going to pick one match from each night. Is that cheating? Maybe. What we can say is one is the main one and the other one is a bonus match. So that's what we're going with. Regardless, night 1 and night 2 is going to seem like a little bit of a weird stretch, because I don't know if they could fit them into the game, but it would be awesome if they could. The one I'm going to go with for night 1 is AJ Styles versus The Undertaker in the Boneyard match, and you can unlock that entire sort of graveyard with the big shed in the background as an arena. That would be incredible. And that was such a fun match as well. And for night 2, I am going to go with the Firefly Funhouse match, with Bray Wyatt finally getting a win and beating John Cena. You could use this as a way to unlock some really goofy content as well, such as the Bray Wyatt in the Muscle Man dance costume and John Cena in the NWO shirt. Who wouldn't want that? That would be so cool. It would be cool if you could even put him in a faction with the NWO. So, and you can have the Firefly Funhouse kind of arena there, but it doesn't matter. That would be so much fun. WrestleMania 37 is a tricky one. Sasha Banks in the main event. Again, not going to count that because it looks like she's on the verge of signing with AEW. The Bad Bunny tag team match will be cool, but again, Johnny Morrison has signed elsewhere. So I'm going to pick a really weird one and go with AJ Styles and Omos versus The New Day for the tag team championships. And as for night 2, well, that one is kind of a strange one too. I was really excited for Randy Orton versus The Fiend, but that one ended in a really weird way. So, as much as I would like to go for that one, and the main event with Roman Reigns was kind of cool, but again, Edge and Daniel Bryan, both in AEW. So instead I'm going to give the women the shout on this one and have Rhea Ripley versus Asuka for the Raw Women's Championship. Good match, not the most iconic of moments, but definitely worthy of a place here. For night 1 of WrestleMania 38, I kind of wanted to go with the Logan Paul and Miz tag team match against the Mysterios, but no. It comes down to, well, 3 really. I mean, there's some really good matches here. Cody Rhodes versus Seth Rollins. You've got Charlotte Flair versus Ronda Rousey. And you've got Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Kevin Owens, no holds barred. Come on. It's got to be Kevin Owens versus Austin. You can unlock that version of Stone Cold. It was a fantastic, fun WrestleMania moment. I really wish those 2 matches were on the 2 different nights. And having looked at night 2, I wish even more they were on separate nights. There was 3 matches on that night that we could have picked. This one, there's so many matches that are eliminated for one reason or another. I'm genuinely thinking Sami Zayn versus Johnny Knoxville. As goofy as that is, I'm sure Johnny Knoxville had signed to be in the game. He'd be down for that, have an anything goes match. Oh my god, this was slim pickings. But you can have it as that's how you unlock Johnny Knoxville. There you go, that's something to do at least. For WrestleMania 39, this one's a little bit easier. Night 1 comes down to either Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn versus the Usos, or potentially Rhea Ripley versus Charlotte Flair. There's a few other decent ones in there, like Seth versus Logan Paul. But for me, I think the tag team title match, being a main event for the first time, deserves it. And night 2 is even easier. It is absolutely Roman Reigns versus Cody Rhodes. Edge versus Demon Finn Balor in a Hell in a Cell might have been a temptation, but Edge is in AEW anyway. So for me, Roman versus Cody. Let's just have the bloodline matches in the main event. And that brings us to WrestleMania 40. Well, are they going to put anything for that in the game? Probably not, because it hasn't happened. Although, given how much of a lock it is, I think throwing in Cody versus Roman 2 as a fantasy booking match would be a nice idea. Maybe they could throw in one of the women's title matches there as well, but who knows? That hasn't been sort of nailed down yet, so I can understand if they don't do that. Obviously, as unlockable content, I would have every single WrestleMania arena all the way through in the game, and you could unlock each one as you play that match. So that would be an automatic unlock, along with the different looks, costumes for the wrestlers, maybe some additional special effects for the custom characters and the custom design stuff. Overall, that was really not easy. I actually slipped up a few times, but I've edited that out. But what do you think? Is there any that I still put in there that you don't think are an option for any reason? Are there matches that you think I missed out that for whatever reason you think would still be viable? Let me know. Put it in the comments. And if there's matches on those cards that I didn't even touch on that you think absolutely deserve that spot, please comment below and let me know as well. We can certainly say that some of them should be bonus matches, but hey, I'm just spitballing here. By the time the game comes out, some of those matches might be on it. They might not even put the all WrestleManias in there. They might just cherry pick out some of the best, and I can understand why. The idea of trying to get Mr. T just to sign the contract so that they can put in a tag team match is probably a bit of a stretch. But overall, that's what I think. They're my views on the game and what should be in it. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, I appreciate it. I know wrestling content isn't for everybody, but this is wrestling game related, and because it's WrestleMania season, there is a lot of that there at the moment. Don't worry, post-WrestleMania, we will be making sure there is a big gap before we put any more WrestleMania and wrestling themed videos out, apart from my general streams. Until next time, take care and take the high ground.